I'm Tim O'Malley, CEO of Ateema Media and Marketing, and thank you for joining us this morning. So we are clearly in unprecedented times, to say the least. So that said, we felt like there was great value in bringing together a group of marketing pros like you to collaborate with this expert panel in order to share issues, ideas, and solutions. So our agenda is simple. We'll go through some introductions and some housekeeping. We'll look at some data and then have a panel discussion with three outstanding marketing professionals and end with Q&A. Before we jump in, I'd like to thank my teammates at Ateema for pulling this event together. So we too are a smaller team as a result of the coronavirus, and I can tell you that our team has been working their butt off to produce this event and the other ones we've been doing in this digital event series. So thank you to Team Ateema. I very much appreciate it. Thanks to our partners at TimeZoneOne, Garrett Popcorn, the Magnificent Mile Association, and Point B Communications. These are all quality organizations that have been vested in the well-being of our industry for a long time. So that said, while it's no surprise to me that they are here today giving their time and talent to support the industry during these trying times, their involvement speaks volumes about the character of the great people in these organizations. So thank you so much. I very much appreciate it. One of those great people is Kimberly Barris. So Kimberly is the president and CEO of the Magnificent Mile Association. I've had the honor of serving with her on the board of directors and I've found her to be a tremendous leader and even a better person. So Kimberly, would you like to give us a quick update on the Magnificent Mile Association?
I would. Thanks, Tim. Thanks for letting us partner with you on this. When we saw who was going to be presenting, we were so proud because these are some of our best members. So just a big shout out to Ateema for your leadership on these kinds of topics. And thanks to the panelists and for the work that you're doing and for the work that you do in supporting the Magnificent Mile Association. Like Tim said, we too are a smaller, but perhaps more impactful team as a result of COVID-19 and what we've seen in this brave new world. We've completely shifted our messaging, the work that we've done. Obviously, we're not bringing people to the district right now. So we are really focused on pushing information and resources out, much like Ateema and other partners are doing. How can we support our members, and how can we keep the fires burning for when people are able to safely return to our businesses and to our beloved district? So I would say that's the work that we're doing. I'm really interested to hear what your panelists have to say. I especially want to give a call out to, or a shout out to Daniel Thomas and TimeZoneOne. They are our creative and digital media partner, and Point B has done fantastic work with us over the years on our gala invitations and productions. Rob, we hope we'll have a gala this year that we can offer and that you can partner with us. So I just want to say thanks again, Tim. I'm grateful for the work that Ateema is doing, grateful to be your partner. If anyone has any questions for me, please feel free to reach out, president@themagnificentmile.com. And with that, Tim, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Kimberly. And if you'd like to add your email in the chat, you're welcome to do that as well, so people have access to it. So yes, we very much appreciate your partnership, Kimberly, and it's so important to pull people together, and so happy that you guys were willing to work with us on this. So one of our main brand tenets at Ateema is connecting our partners in order to help you and your businesses. And in the past, that's meant physically bringing people together and facilitating introductions at our events. Well, that said, things are different now. So we've been very busy bringing our partners together virtually over the last month, and you'll see in a minute we have an aggressive program moving forward as well. So we believe in the value of our community, and we're committed to doing everything we can right now to keep us together. We're stronger together, we're smarter together, we'll come out of this together, and our city and our businesses will grow together as a result. So here's a quick look at our upcoming events. If you find today's panel helpful, you'll see a few more events that you'll be interested in. Tomorrow, we're doing something a little different. It will be a panel discussion entitled Feel Good Friday. It will be a fun and uplifting experience followed by a virtual happy hour. So this inspiration came from, frankly, some clients and some concierge and so forth that are just mentioning how there's some people who are down and depressed and, you know, fighting. There's a lot of issues here. So we wanted to try and do our part to pull something fun and uplifting together. And so we're going to have a great panel tomorrow with Johnny Vincent. So you'd know him. He sings the national anthem the most for the Cubs. And nobody can hold that last note of the national anthem longer than he can. So his work also, he's known for his work fighting depression. Just an impressive message altogether. Jen Kramer, known for her work in the Chicago events industry, her run for Chicago alderman, her work with Chicago Special Olympics, and her year of love on social media, a bunch of just positive, uplifting work that she's done. And then Ron Kittle from the Chicago White Sox. So he was, oh, that is weird. That's Ron Kittle calling me on the other line. So Ron Kittle from the Chicago White Sox, he was 1983 MLB Rookie of the Year, and he's known for his charity work and crafts and just a positive individual. So next Tuesday, we'll be having a State of the Meetings and Events Industry panel with Rose Horcher from Choose Chicago, Sean Lynch from NHS Global Events, and David Safe from Freeman. We're excited about that one. There's a lot of people with questions about the future of the meetings and events industry, so that'll be good. Next Wednesday, we'll have a virtual panel, COVID-19 Integrated Marketing Communications with the Medill School at Northwestern University. So the panel will feature the head of their program, Kelly Cutler, plus 2 other professors who are both rated in the top 10 marketing professors at NU. So that's going to be a very different perspective and welcome as we all try to craft our own strategies for our own businesses as we try to work our way out of this. And then we're also working on safety and operations for tourism and group-oriented businesses, you know, post-quarantine. So that's to be determined. We have a few people that we're working on, potentially with the city, John Kern from Big Bus, and some other folks. It's going to be a really good panel. We're getting lots of calls for that sort of information. We are still scheduled to have a physical event, Planner Masterclass, June 10th at the old post office. Because our master classes are generally under 100 people, and the post office venue that we're in is ginormous. With that capacity, we're holding out that maybe that the numbers will work then, but we will make that decision when we need to. And our Hospitality and Tourism Summit has been postponed. Frankly, our goal with that event is to sort of reimagine it as a coming out party for our industry. So when Chicago is ready to tell the world that we're open for business, come visit us, come have your meetings and events here. We want to have that, produce that event if it's possible to help us draw attention to the city and all of our businesses. So a little bit about us. I mean, ultimately we help tourism and group-oriented businesses grow by connecting them with a number of different audiences, ranging from staycationers, which are obviously so important right now, and concierge to meeting and event planners. Here are our largest brands. So Planner Masterclass is the newest and fastest growing with recent expansion into San Francisco. We'll also be launching some digital products focused again on the staycationers. So keep your eyes open for that information as we will be sharing it soon. So enough about us. We're here this morning to talk about how you can help your businesses communicate better during these crazy times. So we have a fabulous panel of marketing experts here this morning. Each of them have impressive backgrounds, and I'd like to share some of them with you through introductions, starting with Rob Grusin. Rob is president and creative director of Point B Communications, a Chicago-based branding and digital marketing firm heavily engaged in the hospitality and tourism industries. He leads a dynamic team of leading strategists, artists, writers, digital developers, and media professionals to help bring new or newly reinvented brands to life. Over the past 30 years, Rob has brought his expertise to bear on some of the industry's most well-known and highly regarded hospitality brands, including Marriott, Hilton, Starwood, Fairmont, and the list goes on. Locally, Rob has led the brand development and marketing of dozens of high-profile travel and tourism destinations, including the London House, the Godfrey, Hotel Essex, Hotel Julian, 360 Chicago, Chicago's First Lady, Cruises, Mercury Cruises, and the DuPage Convention and Visitors Bureau. Rob's a Chicago native, father of four, a Loyola University alum, and a board member, of course, of the Magnificent Mile Association. Welcome, Rob. Adrienne Kardosh started her career at Procter & Gamble, selling to national accounts like Walgreens and Costco before transitioning to brand management in Cincinnati. There, she launched Charmin's Mega Roll and spearheaded the Pottypalooza campaign before moving to Chicago to join the Wrigley company. At Wrigley and then at Mars Confectionery following the acquisition, Adrienne held a variety of marketing and sales roles on iconic brands such as Juicy Fruit, Orbit Gum, Skittles, and Starburst Candy. Now, Adrienne is the Senior Vice President of Marketing at Garrett Brands, the company that owns Garrett Popcorn Shops and Frango Chocolates. Her resume certainly covers all the shelter-in-place necessities, all those snacks. I'm guessing that Adrienne is the most popular person on her block right now. And she demonstrates a certain sense of humor through her choice of work. By the way, did I mention Pottypalooza? Welcome, Adrienne. Daniel Thomas is the CEO of TimeZoneOne, a global creative communications agency headquartered in Chicago's Wrigley building. Boy, the Wrigley name is getting a lot of press here today. With offices in New Zealand and Canada. Thomas is a storyteller and communicator at heart, and if you know him, you know that about him. Deeply rooted in the tourism and travel industry, TimeZoneOne works with clients to develop unique, creative communication and strategic marketing plans that produce significant and lasting results. A few of TimeZoneOne's clients include Illinois Office of Tourism, Navy Pier, and of course the Magnificent Mile Association and the Chicago Loop Alliance. Daniel currently serves on the
good.
What's that? Daniel currently serves on the board of the Magnificent Mile. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. There we go. Okay, well, thank you and welcome to Daniel. Welcome to our great panel. Very excited to get started. So we're going to get started here in a second with Adrienne, who has pulled together some very helpful data and insights that will serve as a foundation for our conversation. FYI, you can post your questions for the Q&A in the app. You can see it in the bottom center of your screen if you haven't noticed it yet. I'll try to pull the questions that are most sought after. And in fact, that's a good reminder for me to tell you that the questions that I'll be asking the panelists today have come directly from the questions that you submitted during registration. So there you go. So, okay, Adrienne, would you like to get us started?
Yeah, thank you very much. And you might see me use my daughter's headphones if the sound isn't very good. So just let me know, like do one of these and I'll throw them on so you guys can hear me better. Like Tim said, I'm going to start sharing my screen here. Like Tim said, I thought I'd put together, think of it as my notes from scouring the internet and from attending panels like these. So I'm going to go through them rather quickly. Know that you're welcome to screenshot anything. It's all publicly available information. And know that I will supply Tim with all of the links so you can go and find the information yourself, and you can follow it down whatever rabbit hole you find online as you're looking through everything. The first slide comes to us from Nielsen. I firmly believe history is our best teacher, and they put together 3 different, let's call them disruptive events that have happened over the last 20 years. And you can see by the color coding that they break out the different groups into when that disruption occurs in red, when the recovery starts to happen in purple, and then when they saw the market stabilize in gray. And what I take away from this, without professing to know anything about the differences and similarities between these outbreaks and COVID-19, what I take away is that I am focused less on the arguments about when we are physically reopening and looking more at the 5 to 6 month time horizon of what the purple indicates, and more like the 9 to 12 month time horizon of what the market stabilization indicates. In terms of consumer behavior, which we'll get into a little bit, I think there's unanimous agreement that the behavior we're seeing from consumers today may stabilize, but there are some fundamental shifts that people are anticipating, and I'll go into those during the presentation today. I thought this statistic was exceptional. It comes to us from Edelman PR here in Chicago. They do a trust barometer report every year and have been doing it for 20 years. This year, they did a special one around coronavirus, and I'll read it verbatim because it's quite powerful. 62% of respondents in the US believe that our country will not make it through this crisis without brands playing a critical role. And 63% believe that brands and companies are overall more effective and responding more quickly than our government is. If I take that as the premise for today's call, it tells us that the work we are doing will truly change and strengthen our response collectively as a city and as a country as we move forward. And I have to say, I was not a respondent in this. I haven't met any of you personally, but I've been, admiring your work from afar. And I have to tell you, I believe this statement. I truly believe the people on this call, by sharing our insights and sharing the data we have, we will help each other get through this much more quickly and much more effectively. To transition to how we're going to do that, Accenture, a consulting firm that you guys all know, has put out 5 what they're calling human truths in this new human experience. It'll be hard for you to read on small screens, and so the next 5 slides, no surprise, we'll go through each one in specific. So the first one they call cost of confidence. Think about this in your own context. I personally never thought I would get sick and then have to worry about whether or not a hospital had room for me. I never really thought about going to a grocery store and not finding what I needed to find for my family, and I certainly did not fear other people walking in the same aisle as I. So that's really what number 1 represents. And they talk about how brands can and should respond. On the left, you see something from Edelman cautioning all of us away from humor and escapism. The statistics, again, 53% agree with that statement. We shouldn't be using humorous or too lighthearted in tone. 40% agree avoiding escapism. Lots of people on a crowded beach dance party. This is not the time. And if I think of it in the context that they expect brands to be the ones that are taking us out of this situation, I can see where they want us to have a certain sense of sobriety and responsibility in carrying that torch for all of us. On the right is something a little fun and interesting, though. It comes to us from psychology, and marketers are all armchair psychologists. The way our human brain works is we look for consistency and familiarity in order to get us through what is otherwise uncertain. And clearly we are in uncertain times. So there is psychology behind it. Where you see it in purchase is you see people gravitating toward brands that they have used before. And you see people gravitating toward food items and things they've used before. I think it was in the New York Times that Cheetos is having a fantastic year because all of us feel that nostalgia for those kinds of salty snacks. So what it means for you on the call and what it means for us at Garrett Popcorn is reassuring people of what has not changed. We still make our recipes with basic ingredients. We still, we've been around for 100 years or 70 years, and we've been through a lot together, and we'll get through this too. So looking for those areas within your own brand or your own proposition that give people a sense of security and familiarity. The second one is one we're all living right now, the virtual century. It basically says for years and years, all of these industries have tried to get us to move online. Microsoft Teams, Slack, they've all been trying to get us to work from home, and many companies have resisted. In the middle, Target and the grocery industry has been trying to get us to buy our groceries online and pick up in store for more than 10 years. And now the adoption curve has greatly accelerated to the point where even Medicare is now covering telehealth options. What this means for all of us on the call is consumers' adoption of these items has greatly accelerated. And what we predict is that a lot of the behaviors are going to stick. So think of it yourself. You now have a grocery list inputted into Instacart, Amazon Prime, whatever you're using. You have your credit card information stored. You have your address stored. You've done this before. Pretty much there's very little that stops you from doing it again. And your switching costs to trying something new have kind of gone up. So the bottom line for brands is we're all going to come to this new normal of what can we do and what is now acceptable in the virtual world. And we are all quickly adapting our definition of what is virtual. Are we having a virtual meeting, or am I having a real conversation with 250 people? It's a change over time. What this means for brands is things like buy online and pick up and shop. Things like how much will we want to have menus electronically and digitally instead of physically present where I have to touch it and then other people touch it. And what other kinds of connectivity, even virtual communities, will stick in the coming months. The third is another sort of, it's there in the title. We are all now a health business. North of, almost 90% of people want to know how our brands are protecting employees and customers, and how our brands are operating in this new normal. On the right, Sweet Green is a custom salad company, and right on their website, one of the first things you see is how they're responding to COVID-19 and how they're donating meals to hospitals, even before you click on a menu. Down in the bottom, while it's true Unilever is the #1 soap manufacturer in the world, they are dedicating brand-specific time to the category truth of please wash your hands with soap. The image of the woman there comes from a spin on their Real Beauty campaign, where they're taking close-up imagery of people's faces marked by PPE, or personal protective equipment. So there's lines from the masks or lines from the protective eyewear, and talking about how courage is beautiful. So just some really interesting ways that other brands are linking into health and safety. I'll even share with you at Garrett Popcorn, we're noticing that smaller pack sizes are selling better because they're more individually contained and easier to eat and kind of manage how many fingers are inside your product. A fourth one that Accenture termed cocooning, I've heard other people term it as neighboring, is this idea of when we're all at home, we do kind of reflect in while simultaneously looking and defining our community as one next level out. So on the right, I'm sure you've heard about the grassroots effort behind #Pandemic Pals. It got so big that even Senator Durbin posted it on his Instagram account. But it's basically a grassroots effort for people to write letters or check on senior citizens who might not be able to get out and get their own groceries. On the right is something from Zappos. You know them as a shoe company, and so I find it interesting that their website does not really show shoes. They start expanding into the other simple comforts for, a work-at-home lifestyle. A friend of mine is on their email distribution, and she even shared they had this brilliant email where they had day of the week slippers campaign to kind of take over what all of our work from home shoe attire is right now. And she said she actually clicked on the email and purchased something. I think she got Monday and Friday slippers. What this means for brands is, again, anytime you can give them that sense of how are you reaching out to a community and how can you show your value system, it will be really important to everyone to help feel connected, even if they cannot be physically present. The last one, I'm going to take you on something a little bit academic, but I found it interesting. And I warn you now, I'm a marketer explaining a Google image of a brain. So this will be very interesting, but the way this picture of the brain works, I think you all know from 5th grade, your brain developed inside first, and then it kind of builds out. So the red, the reptilian brain, is the oldest part of your brain. This is your brain stem. It covers things like breathing, temperature regulation, but it also covers your instinct of fight or flight. This is hardwired. And this is something that is genetically something advantageous. And so as we evolve, this is something that is repeated and hardwired. So the people that can react more quickly to the approaching lion, or the people who can react more quickly to the earthquake, will survive, and therefore that genetic marker will pass on, right? So why am I talking about fight or flight right now? We all feel in fight or flight. There is a danger out in the world right now, and your brain is hardwired to react to that danger with a fight or flight mechanism. What it does then is it floods your body with cortisol. Cortisol makes you hyper-focus on that threat. Think of it as if a tiger's coming at you, you really cannot be that kid that like turns around and is like, oh, look at the daisies. You have to stay focused on the tiger. And so the cortisol kind of reinforces the fight or flight focus. What's happening with COVID-19 is we all see a threat, and we're all then releasing cortisol and focusing on the threat. The problem is the threat is a global threat, which is much more in the rational or thinking part of the brain. It's not immediate. There is no tiger in my living room. It's kind of this amorphous thing that is out in the world, which requires rational thinking, or your neocortex thinking, which is a different part of your brain. So your body is trying to react to this with two parts of the brain, and you're basically getting confused. How do you feel this? You might feel this as you're really scatterbrained right now. And I won't use you, I'll say I feel very scatterbrained right now. If someone asks me something, I feel like I have to respond to it right away. And I feel like they've just asked me something that I have to do on top of all the other things I have to do, and they almost get done right now. That is the fight or flight feeling. So as a business owner and as a marketer, how do you kind of now apply this to work? We all need information to greatly simplify. We need to be able to react more quickly. So if you have information for your employees or for your fans about COVID and what you're doing to COVID, put it right up front. Don't hide it down below a whole list of options that are new on the website. If you need to help them understand social distancing, make it very clear, very simple, even if you lose some of the branding or some of the storytelling. Because right now, none of us can process that much information. It has to be clean, it has to be simple, and it has to be right in front of us so that we can process it. Other things that are kind of interesting, if you read into some of this, there are ways that you put off the fight or flight. So there's friend or tend is what they're called. So friend goes back to one of the other pieces we just talked about, which is community. Phone a friend, feel connected to others. And the second is tend, which is rest, relaxation, and nutrition, which sounds a lot like the days of hotels where they talked more about their beds and more about their bathtubs than they talked about all the other amenities. I find it really interesting that right now, to tend to fight or flight, friend or tend are two of the things, and I just think as a marketer, I think that's very inspiring and interesting. Those are the 5 that Accenture had, so I just kind of laid them out really quickly. And again, as promised, these are all of the links. I'll be sure that Tim and Dylan have them to be able to send to the broader group. But thank you for letting me run through my study notes, and I look forward to hearing from other people.
Thank you, Adrienne. That was awesome information, great foundation for our conversation here. And for those as marketers that have wondered why the folks have been hoarding toilet paper, well, fight or flight, that's why.
Yeah.
So very interesting. So let's jump into our panel. So starting with a softball here to get us warmed up, how often should our clients or prospects be hearing from us during this time? And again, we'll start, anyone who would like to start the conversation, please go ahead and jump in, and then we'll build on it from there.
I'll jump in real quick. And I think this is really plays off well to Adrienne's fight or flight comment. I think we all have a tendency to want to be out there regularly, to be doing something. But the last thing that we need is another vapid kind of COVID email saying, we're here, we care. How many of, we've gotten endless messages like that. So without giving a specific number, if we have something meaningful to say that's of value to our prospects and our customers, we should be communicating with it. If we don't, then we should lay back until we do, and until business is ready to get going again.
So one tip that came out of the PR panel last week was that people were saying now that you have more time on your hands, people are paying more attention to their email box. And so if you're annoying them, they're going to delete you more likely right now. Would you find that to be true?
Yeah, I think it's very true, Tim. I mean, we're all overwhelmed with e-blasts. And I think one of the things, not just from a messaging standpoint, but also from an outreach standpoint, more than ever before, simple messaging, simple communication, going back to the lowest common denominator. Now's the time. You don't need to react and get out there and just, to Rob's point, I mean, don't push a message out just because you feel you have to. Like, now's the time to actually take a breath and actually look at your customer base, because the reality is you actually might be doing yourself more harm because your customer base has changed, just like all of our customers out there, right? So, you know, I love the analogy of the hotel industry, you know, like for those out of the hotel industry, you know, your daily discipline around reviewing, you know, ADRs and capacity and overnight room rates. 9 o'clock every morning, you do that briefing with your GM, right? Now's the time to do that with your branding. And you need to do that. You need to be looking at the data from your websites, from your social channels, because your customer base has changed dramatically. And it's not just about who's actually engaging with you right now. It's who's not engaging with you that was previously. So I think that's real opportunity. And I think from that, the relevance to Rob's point is really, really key. Only say something if you've got something to say that is relevant to your customer.
So that's good insight. I mean, we do have a little time on your hands, more than the usual day-to-day when we're obviously working business as usual. So really good advice. Focusing in on the quarantine marketing, if you will. You know, what are the appropriate ways to be marketing right now?
So I think, or at least for our client base, most of them are laying low. They're using those channels that are low or no cost. Their CRM channels make sense, again, if they have something of value to say. Social posts on occasion certainly make sense to remain top of mind. I think it was really interesting. Fuel Travel recently did a survey and asked people right now, what is the first thing they think about? Give us one word they think about when you mention the word travel. And just imagine 2 months ago even, what people might have said. And now the primary words were things like scary, unsafe, cautious, wait. People are, to Daniel's point, in such a different mindset right now that to try to kind of instigate involvement or get somebody to get in a buying mood is a pretty unsurmountable task. So gentle touch bases for now seem to make sense. Keep your powder dry. Business will be coming back, and we're really emphasizing making sure people are very ready with their messages and their planning when it does. Get your house in order.
Yeah, it's really key, Rob. I think the other thing too is what I've seen is this natural sort of reaction for brands and business to almost take on the healthcare and the professionals role. And I would suggest, you know, from a responsibility and appropriateness standpoint, is stay in your lane, listen to local officials, listen to health officials, listen to experts on that. Don't try and play that role. And I think the more respectful that you can be and use that as influence around how you will react, I think it'll help you with the appropriateness of your message. By all means, a key right now, and I know this is probably repeating the same thing, but just empathy and understanding, just the core basics of just acknowledging, showing humility. And it's okay not to have all the answers right now as brands, like before, we almost felt vulnerable when we put that realness out into the marketplace. And now's actually that time to show the realness. Before we jumped on the panels, we were having a bit of a laugh about backgrounds with this being the new reality, right? And before we were, something that's basic is how many times did you decline a FaceTime from a friend because you worried about what the background was, or you worried about how, tidy the house was, right? People don't mind that right now. This is our new norm. This is a reset in what we're going through, and it's okay for it to be a bit scrappy. It's okay for it to be a bit messy. So I think it's one of those things. It's a bit of fight the fear and do it anyway, and it can be a little bit uncomfortable. But just be real. Just be real.
That's good. So, full disclosure, so Daniel sounds like he's a little more educated on some of this because he's working with the state on the All in Illinois campaign. So he's got some inside baseball information there for us. So, by the way, great campaign.
Thanks, buddy.
So we've kind of skirted some of these issues about, being authentic, don't going too crazy, save the bullets for, when the market opens up and stuff like that. So any advice for how to stay relevant without stepping in some of the landmines that you had already mentioned? And then any examples, who's doing it right now?
I can jump in with a few things that I like. There's 3 or 4 brands right now. One that's sticking out for me, we're all doing probably a fair share of drinking right now, but Aviation Gin, I don't know if you've seen them, overall liquor sales are up, right? They're donating 30% of proceeds and revenue to the US Bartenders Guild. And, from a hospitality industry, and I know a lot of people on this call, and we're all live and breathe the hospitality industry. I mean, restaurants, hospitality, I just think that's fantastic. And, as consumers, for me, how brands act right now and the actions that they take we've got long memories. And, to Adrienne's point around the complexity of the brain, right? We're going to remember the behavior that brands have in this really scary phase into the others. From an airline perspective, it's interesting watching United Airlines and American. United's doing a phenomenal job around focusing on evolving their safety message into cleanliness of their cabins and social distancing and making sure that middle seat's blocked off. From a comms perspective, they're not doing a great job because it's all words. American Airlines are communicating via video and humanizing that message to the industry. So, as a consumer, when I see this, I'm actually connecting greater with American Airlines because it's people and it's the CEO talking to me on a video versus United overwhelming me with pages and pages of information. But when you dig deeper, they're doing a phenomenal job in giving me confidence around that safety. I think Choose Chicago is doing a great job. They've pivoted tremendously from a resource perspective. And I think for a lot of people on this call that, again, tourism, hospitality, whether it's virtual tours, whether it's content that you can be sharing, I just think that they've launched a really good range of options. And I think there's just some examples out there of, and look, full disclosure, you said it on the floor, Navy Pier is a client, but we delved into research with that client around their Imagine campaign and the brand loyalty. And, they're pivoting to sort of, really good reinforcement and confident messages on the wheel, displaying over 50 messages to the city when we needed reassurance, but now it's sort of pivoting. And I think the one point I make around that is, we think of Navy Pier as a pier that we walk on or we go and visit and dine at. there's actually 82 businesses and livelihoods, restaurants, bars, eateries, Garrett popcorn, you name it, ice cream, burger places. So what they've pivoted around is this whole Imagine umbrella brand focusing on those 82 businesses within the pier versus the pier itself. So that's for me the examples that I have seen so far.
And I think those are great examples too. I think it's important to note when we think about the audience that's probably tuned in right now, when you pour through the internet, these really great, pulling at heartstring examples are typically big brands that are really working hard to keep consumer sentiment and maintain brand loyalty. And they might have the resources to do some of that even when the doors are closed. For a lot of the brands that are wondering what to do right now that may be local where their doors are shuttered, I think it's a hard thing to know, how to use that information to act on. So certainly we want to be showing compassion. We want to be putting aside latent sales tactics and feeling like we have a heart and we care about our community. But again, I do think that doing too much of that right now, especially with if you're like every other client that we've seen, especially with your marketing dollars so heavily evaporated, you could be spending resource that really is going to be needed come late summer, early fall too.
I'll jump in on that. Garrett Popcorn is one of those small companies that's shuttered, right? So we have shops here in Chicago. We have them globally, and every market is on lockdown. So we have one shop open around the world, and it happens to be at 87th and Cottage Grove. And the reason it's open is we retrofitted a drive-through so that we didn't have the lobby open and people could drive through. And we did that in, I want to say, like 48 hours on one weekend. And then we've been kind of evolving since, trying to retrofit. Oh yeah, people need a menu. And so now we're trying to figure that out. I think to your point, when your shops are shuttered, there's an obvious economic impact and an emotional impact to our own team that is now not at work. And we're really conscious that when we are making our efforts are with the community in mind, but that community is defined as including our own team. And we're really conscious that while we're very proud of the support we have with hospitals here in Chicago, and we have a long-standing tradition that many people don't know about of Garrett Popcorn donating to first responders at hospitals like Advocate and like Northwestern, we are playing down, and we're not really talking about those efforts right now where every other brand is, because the last thing I want is for a team member to be sitting at home and feeling like the resources are being diverted to one place over another. Some things that are working well, or I'll put it out there and then I'd love the feedback in the chat. What we did is we hand out small pieces or small bags of popcorn during parades. The Magnificent Mile Parade, for example, in the holidays, they're just little bags. We decided to get another run of film, and we're selling them to people now as individual snack bags for Garrett Popcorn. And we're getting feedback, and that's what I was talking about earlier, about the ability to kind of have your own contained package of something. And I share the story because it was very scrappy. It was not a long artwork process or anything like that. And something else that we're noticing is segregating the information. So if it's very informative, and Daniel, to your point, you're kind of reading some facts and figures, it's going on our website. It's not going in an email. It's not going on social media. I wish I had the statistic for you. One of the things in the Edelman Trust Barometer that I mentioned, they talked about corporate websites becoming one of the most trusted sources of information for consumers, ahead of social media and thankfully influencers. So we're using our website and trying right now to reconfigure so that we can put the information first and foremost. And the last thing I'll share is that when we are partnering with other brands here in Chicago, it is really our best content is with our partners. We did some work with Lou Malnati's. It happened to be that National Deep Dish Pizza Day and National Caramel Popcorn Day were like back to back. And so we had a banter about that week being built for Chicago. And both brands saw significant engagement and purchase off of a bit of Chicago pride. So I'll share those as some of the things that have been working. And to your point, I think, Robert, we've had the same concerns about, making sure that we have our team as part of the definition of community when we look at our efforts outside.
There's a lot there. So first of all, anyone else getting hungry after that conversation? I don't know what it is, but I did want to highlight something. My wife is a respiratory therapist at Lutheran General, and her team received popcorn from Garrett. And I can tell you that Garrett made their day, the whole team, that just really brought light to that floor, which isn't so light right now. So, that's really meaningful marketing in these times, and I think a really good example of how to do it right. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Well, thank you for your wife.
Yeah, as we, she's a fan. So as we move into post-quarantine marketing here, let's focus on, because we don't have a ton of time. So let's focus on, our audience is hungry for tips on how to market post-quarantine. We've been focusing on the quarantine marketing. Let's talk about post-quarantine. And I'll encourage our panelists here to focus in on the quick tips, anything that you'd say, focus on these things so that we make sure that they have some deliverables to walk away with. Who'd like to start?
I can jump in there. I think there's kind of 4 things to really keep in mind when you can finally re-enter the market. Number 1, keep it local. We've been hearing and reading so much about people having a real voracious appetite to get back out again, but probably a hesitation to get on an airplane to do cross-country travel or certainly international travel. So we're going to see a lot of drive vacations, radius within 5 or 6 hour visitations. So keeping your efforts within that radius are going to allow you to concentrate your dollars and probably be more effective where the business is likely to come from. Keep it nimble. There's certain mediums that we turn to normally that we won't coming right out of quarantine. Things that require long contracts, a lot of out-of-home advertising, some print, short inventory items are just going to be a challenge initially. So those digital tools, paid search, programmatic advertising, email marketing, the things that you can track and react to quickly are going to be the tools that you'll want to use. And then negotiate for value. Everybody's going to be coming into a climate that is that's going to be value driven. So with almost every media vendor that we've worked with, we've had to have hard conversations with them regarding our clients' ability to be not to be at a level that they were at before. We've just been amazed at how receptive almost every single vendor has been to allowing our clients to renegotiate, push contracts forward, and even fully cancel things if necessary. So we're all partners in this, and I think you should look for media value that's much different than it was before we went into this whole thing.
I think the things that I'll add there to your point, Rob, I really agree. The focus is going to be local. So local and regional is certainly going to be one thing. I think to add on to that too is be prepared for spontaneity from consumers. We've been inside, and from a tourism perspective, sometimes we plan, a couple of weeks out, 3 weeks out, maybe even longer. I think what you're going to see is all of those patterns, in my opinion, have gone out the window, and there's an opportunity to kind of repave the way. So it could be that at 2:00 on a Wednesday, you're like, you know what, I need to get in the car and go for an overnight and do an Airbnb in Evanston or Galena, or I got relatives in Southern Illinois or across the borders. So I think you're going to see, so you need to be ready for that, just particularly around your messaging. I know I've said this before, but I plead for people to keep it simple. Don't overthink your messaging. We're still going to require empathy. And I think, it's one of those things that you just don't overcomplicate it. Don't be, and I think the only other thing I'd say is, as marketers, brands, and we love to sort of sound good, and we love feel good messages, but most importantly, it's about doing good. And if you can show those actions and things that you've done, whether it's through the coronavirus and some of those things, some of those moments, your wife, Tim, incredible, like a small token of appreciation, whether it's Garrett's or whatever it may be, is going to not tick the box, that's the wrong word, but it is a feel-good moment as opposed to just sounding and doing good. And, we can see through the bullshit when it comes to marketing. We're consumers, we're smart. More than ever before, you've got to take that next step.
Well, that trust data that Adrienne mentioned earlier to start us off, I think really just, to me, shines out above most of the messaging I've seen so far, because the authenticity is just so important right now. To your point, nobody wants to see the bullshit during these times. So,
yeah.
I think
Adrienne, do you have any tips?
Yeah, I think I'll just kind of share some of the things we're thinking about. There was something Daniel said that sparked one of my favorite sayings, which is, you can have it all, just not all at once. And we try to look at the messaging that way. You don't have to know everything at the same time. So we expect people will Google and find out if we're open. And when they find out, I want them to see that we're taking their safety seriously. So I want it to be really transparent, that we're creating a safe place for people. Second, when they show up at a shop, I want it to be really clear to them what's new in terms of how you navigate through the space. And I want it to be really clear to them what's not changed. If you want to have a sample, I will happily hand you a sample. And if you want to ask for 5, I will happily hand you 5. So how we kind of provide that safe space through acknowledging their immediate fear and acknowledging what hasn't changed. Another thing, I loved everything, Robert, that you said, and I would just add one of the things, a bit of a spoiler, so don't tell anyone, is we're just so thankful to the fans down at 87th. The drive-through is really busy, and we've already started talking about when we reopen, how do we show that appreciation? What does that look like? And what does, the city has a reopening and the state has a reopening, but what does our reopening look like? And even down to the microcosm of one specific shop. And the last thing I'll share with you is we're absolutely looking at, for the first time in 70 years, how do you purchase your popcorn or purchase your Garrett in a way that you can buy it ahead and pick it up in a shop, like different options, right? And making sure that people have more digital options or even more of a virtual one-on-one presence, where for 70 years we've had a very personal face-to-face presence. And so those are some of the things that we're working on.
Great. So hopefully there's some helpful tips for everyone here. So, I mean, there's so much movement going on, let's face it, and everyone is trying to read the tea leaves and figure out what's going to be our best strategies going forward. So it begs to the future. So looking back on this period 5 years from now, what do you think will be the most memorable or significant changes in the marketing landscape for our industry? Thoughts?
I kind of think it's going to be this blend of online, offline. Like, again, like you're getting too much insight into my daily life, but if you follow D Nice on Instagram, he's awesome. And he's basically a DJ, and he's been doing club quarantine is what he's calling it. And he basically will go live on Instagram, and then there's a big old dance party. And when I see big, I mean like Michelle Obama has shown up. I mean, like, people have shown up. I don't know how I found out about it, but I did. And now my girls and I, who are 8 and 10, are doing, club quarantine. And I think, had you asked me a month ago, would I be virtually clubbing with my 8 and 10-year-old? I would have absolutely said, I just wouldn't even know how to respond to that. I think that cross is true. And, that might be an extreme example, but then you have a 70-year-old popcorn company that has never had anything but standing on a line and going, online on a website, talking about how we merge that experience. And so how again, you can get that personalized experience from Garrett, but in a virtual world, I think is going to be really the next step for us.
Yeah, Adrienne, I was just going to, you sparked a thought to that question too around, I'm really actually looking forward to looking back through the rear vision mirror and actually putting the customer back at the center of everything that we do. And I know we say that as marketers and as businesses, but because we have reset incredibly, right? So let's just face it, you're going to choose hotels in the future that are going to talk about not just their fabulous amenities and beds and the loyalty that you may have to them, but you're going to pay attention to the cleanliness. You're going to pay attention to the way that they sanitize the rooms, and same with airlines. Look at how many of us get on board with our sanitizing wipes and so forth. Like, we're going to think about those sorts of things. Restaurants, we're going to think about touching the menus. Are they using one-time menus? Is there social distancing in the restaurant? Look, smart brands market around the consumer, and I'm not saying that we don't, but I think at times I sit back and think sometimes brands are a little selfish and go, okay, it's about us. And this is going to force us to reset and go, no, put ourselves in the consumer shoes and really center our marketing around the customer. And I think that that's really going to be insightful, because to your point, it's about that humanization and how you get back to that. And, we all value things differently in different ways. So that's a really important thing for me, because I think as business, that's why we get in and do what we do, right? It's about people. So I'm looking forward to that part.
Well said. Amen to that. So looking at, there's a lot of people here, a couple hundred people on this call looking to work with other people in the industry. How do you guys see partnerships in this business being helpful during this period, especially as we come out of quarantine, are trying to get back to work? Thoughts?
I shared before, I think they're really valuable. And I think, when they're authentic, it might, someone mentioned earlier, like every brand says they're in it with you. I was watching it was a national TV ad of a woman for Toyota, and she's holding a well-branded Toyota mug. And the whole thing starts with, Toyota has always been there for you. And I'm thinking, like, really? Like, I don't even understand what you're saying. So I think those kinds of partnerships, maybe not so great. But I'm really proud of the example with Lou Malnati's on, National Deep Dish Pizza Day, National Caramel Popcorn Day, and blending them into a week for Chicago. And I think there are lots of examples where we in Chicago, we know how to be good neighbors. And I think there's some really great pieces of inspiration we could all have if we just brainstormed a little bit. It could be really amazing.
Yeah, I love the Lou Malnati's example. It's the perfect thing that we probably wouldn't have seen even just a few months ago. I think for quite some time, we're all in this together. Those people we might normally compete with we're all going to be vying for the customer to come back into the market, yes, and then hopefully choose us too. So I think our mindset's going to be a lot more towards moving people into the market and then moving them into our business. And I think our first objective will be to drive visits and then revenue. We've certainly seen this coming out of past recessions and out of 9/11, occupancy first, and then let's get the dollars back. Maybe not as applicable for Garrett's, but certainly for people in the tourism and hotel industries. And I think finding partners with like objectives and making what might have been unusual alliances makes a lot of sense now.
Yeah.
Go for it, Adrienne. No, I was just going to say that I agree. Partnership is going to be the critical thing, and going back to the notion, and this will sound very clichéic, but we are in this together, and it doesn't matter whether you're a competing hotel, it doesn't matter whether you're a competing restaurant. To your point, those unusual alliances actually are going to be the right way to go moving forward. I guess I have a little bit of a unique perspective because my team is responsible for marketing tourism in general, internationally and domestically at the state level. So we're looking for stories, information out there. So if there's people on this call that are wondering how to amplify that message and get it out there, there's 2 email addresses that you can submit. If it's a news or a press release, send it to news@enjoyillinois.com. And if it's social media related, but more timely, then send it to social@enjoyillinois.com. We can't guarantee that everything will make it, but I can tell you just from a state perspective, and to Tim's point, getting a little bit of a look under the hood and what the all-in message looks like. We'll see something else released this morning from, this week is National Volunteer Week. I can tell you we're already planning themes around restaurants, around hotels, around small business, around attractions. And when the time's right, there will be a statewide initiative launch. So I can't sort of go into too much detail, but we are there to help. And so please start to think about that and submit, stories and information, and just follow the statewide social channels as well.
That's great. Well, again, we appreciate your insight here. We will, as Ateema, will be looking for help in terms of getting the word out once we do get the finalized plan for the updated summit, because we do want to leverage that as a tool to help all of us, again, tell the world we're open. So is there any thoughts on how Chicago as a whole can promote itself best after the stay-at-home orders are lifted?
Yeah, I think it's certainly I'm really excited at what we're going to have to offer coming out of quarantine. I know there's some concern about international travel drying up, and that's probably true. But at the same time, that goes both ways. That group of people from the local audience that might have been going to the islands for a sales trip, or might have been going overseas for meetings or leisure travel, are now going to keep it close to home. And so as long as we present them with the right message, I think we have an opportunity that might not have existed otherwise. But showing Chicago as, people in, huge crowded streets probably won't be the best way to re-enter the market. Focusing on our lakeshore and our beautiful open parks will make a lot of sense. Showing environments where people can stroll without being shoulder to shoulder with everybody else is probably, so it's changing a little bit of the way that people might normally envision an urban market, to try to bring as many of those people back into the cities we can.
Really good points.
Yeah, I think just on that too, I think while the world around us has changed, and to Rob's point, but Chicago hasn't changed, right? Our DNA is, we are the city of big shoulders. We're the city of firsts. We are, the crossroads of America. And while it's going to be tougher in an international market, the reasons to believe in Chicago and the state of Illinois still remain. So I think what we've got to strike is that perfect balance of the reasons to believe in the destination domestically and the reasons to come here, but then also not just the empathetic piece of it, but also the smart component to it. So giving people reassurance that we are taking social distancing seriously, making sure that areas like a Navy Pier, like a Magnificent Mile, just giving them the confidence that we're actually taking the new world seriously. And I think we're seeing this. And look, not to make a political statement here, but you're seeing very different actions in Illinois than you are in some other states, right? And there's merits to both sides. But look at our statistics and where we're at. 25% right now are still getting infected with this virus. So we're not out of the woods right now, and we've got a way to go. But I think as we pivot to a domestic audience, good news is we've got 330 million people in America in a high level sense. We're not a small country with 10 million people that has to look to other borders. We can actually get through this. And if you think about the 114 million visitors or 117-ish that visited last year, 112 million of them were domestic. So the regional donut state markets, the drive markets, that's where our opportunity is, but we've got to balance that with the message being right.
Yeah, I agree with that, Daniel. We're focused on helping our clients meet those markets' needs as well. So I'd like to switch to Q&A. We can go on with this conversation for a while, I think. So we've got a lot of good questions. So one I would like to start with from Adam Elias. So he says, for location-based businesses, where should your creative focus be on cleanliness or safety, comfort? How much around this overall topic is too much for consumers to hear, preventing that, obviously you don't want to go too far with it so it becomes noise. Thoughts?
Yeah, I guess the way we're handling it is, again, kind of when do they need to know what information? So if they're in social media, they're connecting with friends and family. So we're leaning into more storytelling content there. Whereas if you're on my website, I'm going to give you the brass tacks of how we're keeping it clean. And the other thing I'll say is we're being much more intentional with publishing FAQs for our community managers on social media, so they are equipped to answer the question factually, accurately, and succinctly. And so that's something that we're being really conscious, so that if somebody or when somebody asks us that question, we are able to respond in a timely way. And that frees up let's call it the push channels, to be able to do the storytelling and to be able to do the more beautiful content and recipes.
Great. So
yeah, I was just going to say, in short answer for me, Tim, I think, what we do as an agency, amongst all the elevator pitch, we do two things, very simple: tell stories, solve problems. Prior to COVID, we probably sold 80% of the time we probably told stories, and 20% of the time we solved problems. And I don't mean problems necessarily negative. They could also be positive, right? I would say, to answer that question too, is not knowing about their business. I think you're going to be in trouble if you get too creative. And I think brands, agencies, you have to be 50-50. There's great ideas with creative, but if you're creative led solely, you're going to be in trouble. So I think you've got to come back to reality, and you've got to do a 50-50 mix of those two things. So yep, big idea, good creative, but you've also got to balance it with some of those problems. So 50-50 mix of storytelling and solving problems.
And just one quick addition to that. I think people need to be prepared to be really nimble with their messaging. It's going to evolve very quickly. When you first come back into market, people want to know that things are clean and that you are taking extreme precautions to keep people apart, and probably are going to be more value focused. Within weeks or months, that message could start to evolve, where that becomes secondary but still important, and then you can start telling the rest of your story again. And then hopefully, certainly 5 years from now, no one's looking at 6 feet of distance anymore, but time will tell.
Well, it's a good point. The personal context that people will get from living through this in the next month, and until whatever we come out of this, is going to also shape our thoughts and reactions to messaging. And to your point, Rob, that's going to change very quickly.
Yeah, I guess another tool to help with, Rob, what you're saying, we've invested more into social listening tools to be able to stay nimble and relevant. And there's all kinds of them, Sprout Social, Meltwater, you'll find them when you look for them. Maybe before now, I don't know how your company would have viewed them. I would argue they're mission critical right now because the conversation really is evolving quickly, and the tools will allow you to set up two general kind of searches, one that's maybe brand or industry specific, and then one that is related to the regional pandemic, the regional COVID response. And so you can kind of get a sense for sentiment between those two things.
Yeah, Adrienne, even the sentiment function on Facebook is pretty good. Like we're tracking that just at a very basic elementary level on some campaigns, and they're tools that are obviously right there in front of you as well.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So do you think that business travel will be reduced as significantly as tourist travel? That's from Robin Sharp.
I think yes, in short answer. I am probably going to go against some of the narrative that's out there from a city perspective. I think it's going to be predominantly leisure for the immediate future. I'm not saying that meetings and conventions aren't going to happen, and obviously they're incredibly critical to our city and state. But I think there's some work to be done there, because it's one thing, it's one thing to fly the planes and, fly back overseas and so forth. It's the other thing to get the consumer confidence back. And what I'm seeing right now is, while there might be intent to travel and intent to do meetings, conventions and so forth, the confidence in the consumer component is not going to be there. There's at least going to be a third, and certainly the data that I'm seeing right now, my own opinion, but I think 30-40% of consumers are not going to have the confidence for another 12 months.
There's a lot of evidence to support what Daniel's saying too, that there's a feeling that local leisure is going to be the first thing to come back. And look, business travel wants to happen again, but the hard part is if you're an executive, it's a challenge for people to make a decision to put somebody else on a plane if they think they may be putting that person at risk. So these are not, business travel for many people aren't their own decisions, but the decisions of their organization. So those decisions need to be taken with a much greater degree of caution than if you make a decision, to drive to Branson for the weekend. I've never been to Branson, but.
Yeah. And the good thing about that, Rob, and to reassure people on there, and I'm sure you follow data, but, from a state perspective, if I look at that number of inbound tourists, the 117 million that we had last year, 86% of it was leisure. So there is enough visitors to go around. Yes, there might be fewer of them, but you're not going to have to reach far and wide. And I don't think it's going to cost as much for you to market around that respect. Yeah.
So here's a good question from David Diley. So do you think that outdoor group gatherings like festivals will come back sooner than large indoor meetings?
In short answer, I think yes. I do.
I would agree.
You've already seen some of those large events sort of postpone, and I think everyone's in that. But I think outdoor spaces, outdoor events, yes, I think there'll be greater criteria. But it's interesting. Like I've got friends with businesses actually in China and restaurants and what have you. So, and of course, we've got an office in there for the state, and we've been following different markets around the globe. And it's really interesting. Cars are flowing in China. People are eating back in restaurants. Yes, they're all, in masks and doing things, but that's the new norm, right? And, so the outdoor component, outdoor spaces, I think are going to respond and come back faster than anything indoors and in the convention environment.
And just to add to that, I'm not an expert on whether indoor or outdoor will come back more quickly, but U.S. Travel Association does indicate that younger travelers will get moving more quickly than older travelers, which probably would mean the outdoor festivals and things like that we'll see a resurgence more quickly.
Yeah, and to that point too, Rob, they are prepared to take a greater risk to older generations. So, you know, as challenging as that will present for industry, I absolutely agree with that. Yeah.
Okay, so last question. How do we change our marketing and advertising strategies when turning from a physical event into a virtual event? What are the most effective platforms?
It's a good question.
Yeah. You mean in terms of hosting the event, or you mean in terms of telling people about the event?
I think in terms of marketing and advertising strategies. So, I mean, I would say it becomes more about the messaging and the content, because you're not talking about a place. Like when we're marketing our master classes to planners, for example, we spend a lot of time, you know, if we send 3 or 4 different themed emails to our audience of meeting and event planners, some percentage of them will be about the physical nature of the venue and the neighborhood. And we'll use pictures is obviously a great way to draw people. And when you're talking about, you know, this, you can only see so many pictures of, you know, of the you know, the squares here. So you have to really focus more on the messaging and the benefits of, you know, what you'll get by sitting at your desk in front of your computer screen for a given amount of time. So from that standpoint, you definitely have to be a little more crafty. Subject lines, I think, matter more because you don't, again, have that physical asset you could leverage. Those are a few tips I would give. Yeah,
Tim, you raise a point there. I think, you know, we in the event business, right, you always, there's a saying that we use and have used is that content is king, right? And that obviously applies outside the event industry as well. But I actually think containment's going to be king as well. And I think event planners and meeting spaces are going to have to be a whole lot more strategic, not just about the messaging, but about the logistics of the event. And, you know, I think people who host events and hold events, whether it's indoor, outdoor, you're going to have to figure out how you give the confidence to the attendee. Because if I buy into the content, I'm in, right? And I was in previously, but if I'm going to be put in a room with 100 people and be forced to kind of be in a space where I'm not comfortable, I think that's going to be a real barrier. So I think event planners and marketers on the front end are going to have to be a whole lot more logistically focused and balance that and bring that top of mind as a priority along with the content too.
Very good point. Any last thoughts?
You know, I was trying to, go ahead, please.
No. Well, I was just going to say, you know, big shout out to Ateema, thank you, and Mag Mile Association. The plug for the organization. Those guys have been great during this tough time of keeping members connected and bringing kind of alternative thinking to, you know, how to address a situation like this. Real quick, as far as what to do in this environment. Get your house in order. It's the biggest thing I could recommend. Look at your website, look at your databases, make sure you have creative ready to go, make sure you have plans in place and contingent plans in place.
Yeah, very well said. And, you know, I was going down the same train of thought of how do you make a virtual event or an on and offline event feel more real, you know, and how do you, the logistics for sure need to be ironed down because otherwise it's too distracting from that moment where you finally feel comfortable with the screen. And I wonder, you know, as event planners and as hospitality, as you're blending on and offline, what does that mean? Do you have some sort of I don't know, is there some sort of care package, something that goes physically to the attendees that are virtually not present, but you still get your branding and you still get your experience out to them? I don't know what that means yet, but I think there is going to be more and more of this blend. And how do you, as you well said, keep the logistics calm so that they can actively participate in whatever that feeling is that they get from the environment?
Very good. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us, and a big thank you for our wonderful panelists. If I could give a round of applause or a standing O, I would, but this is just going to have to do today. So how's that?
Tim, and thanks to you and the team. I know you've been working really hard at just trying to get things together, and we're all craving human interaction. And if we can help in any way, this is what it's all about. So kudos to your team for having the vision to pull us together to chat and hopefully help.
Well, thank you. I certainly learned a bunch. Hopefully the audience, based upon the fact of the number of folks have stayed around late in the game here, we must be doing some good here. So hopefully everyone's enjoyed it. We will be hosting or posting a recording of this panel on the Ateema LinkedIn page in the next day or so. So please share it if you think it can be helpful, and follow us if you'd like to get more information. Please join us tomorrow for Feel Good Friday. I think Dylan has already put the link in the chat mechanism so you can register for that. I think it's going to be a fun, uplifting, and we're going to finish with a happy hour, which will have some chuckles as well. And Tuesday's State of the Meetings and Events Industry panel will be, I think, insightful. We've gotten a lot of questions about that part of our business. And then, of course, Wednesday's Northwestern Marketing panel is going to provide a very different perspective on opportunities in terms of marketing your brands in these tough times.